these machines are very, very fun, as we'll get into later. But first, a little bit of exposition and story time, because this machine actually kind of takes me back a little bit. This machine, well, it was actually my very first kind of retro machine. And I put that in air quotes because back when I had it, it wasn't really a retro machine just yet. It was an old machine, yes, but it wasn't exactly retro like we consider retro now. The time was around 2010 or so, and I was kind of going through a bit of a depressive episode. So I was getting into technology a little bit more and kind of seeking out projects to kind of keep my head in the game. One of the things I came across was a e-waste iBook G4, and I could kind of understand why it was, and I could kind of understand why people still want to just get rid of these things today, and we'll get into that in a moment. But I basically had to tear that thing down to every last screw and rebuild it, and eventually I had a working iBook G4. And the battery was kind of shot at the time, but back then Apple was still running that program for you to get your battery replaced free, and my iBook actually fell under the recall, so I was able to get my battery swapped out for free with a completely fresh one. So I had a pretty cool iBook G4 at the time, and actually what I ended up doing was, because the back panel here actually comes off very easily once you get these screws out, I popped this rear panel off, and I say rear as in display rear, and put a little rainbow logo back here so it actually lit up rainbow. It was pretty awesome. I really miss that little iBook, and that's kind of why I've taken so nicely to this one, because I kind of want to do this one up like I had that one all done up and make it nice, and we're kind of getting there. But of course, unfortunately, parts are a little bit harder to find these days because these machines are now much older and the parts well has kind of dried up a bit. So let's get into the current day about how I got this machine. One of my Twitter followers, I believe his Twitter handle is 75 megahertz Mac. He goes by Nick, and he actually lives kind of local to me. So we arranged a meetup because he wanted to buy my black MacBook, which I opted to sell off because I wasn't using it anymore, because I actually got a 2010 MacBook from Eric of Eric's Edge. And I really fell in love with that machine, and I use it like at least once a week because it's still a really fun machine to me. And I actually can run old games on it perfectly fine. And because it's a 2010 MacBook, it has the better integrated GPU from NVIDIA, so it can actually game somewhat competently with games from the era. As such, I wasn't really using that 2007 MacBook anymore, and when I went to go sell it off to him, he mentioned he had an iBook G4 that he no longer wanted, and he was willing to just hand it off to me for free. And I said, heck yeah, I'll take it. I like a challenge, because these machines are a challenge. They are not fun to work on in the slightest if you need to do anything past the very basic. By the basics, I mean like the keyboard, the RAM, the airport card, stuff like that. Because the hard drive is just all sorts of hard to get to in this machine. You have to take the thing fully apart for the most part, and if you need to get to the optical drive too, that's also a chore. So if you have a bad optical drive in one of these and you need to replace it, I highly recommend you do both that and the hard drive at the same time, because you're going to be looking at some fun if you have to tear this thing apart again. And then when you want to put it back together, it just never wants to go back together the right way again, and you have to really kind of poke cables into the right places, and you have to watch out for all these little gotchas and everything. And it's just, it's frustrating. And there are a few machines that made me invent new curse words as I was working on them. Some that I would like to share with you, but would probably hurt my chances of ever getting monetized ever again. Speaking of monetization, did you know you can help me out by donating to my Ko-Fi coffee page that I will hopefully edit in here somewhere? And if you like what you see and want to throw a couple bucks in the tip jar, feel free, go for it. Otherwise, feel free to keep watching. Up to you. I have no pressure. Anyway, back onto the video currently at hand. So Nick told me that the problem with this machine, besides the hard drive, was that the optical optical drive was kind of not doing so well. It would spit out discs, it wouldn't read them, and I found out that the problem there was that this model was actually equipped with the worst optical drive you could get with one of these machines, aka the ones that could only read CDs and not DVDs. And he was trying to put DVDs in it, I believe, and I would have expected Apple at this juncture to have put DVD drives in these machines, but they didn't. And that's an entirely reasonable expectation to have, because Apple was really kind of going in on DVDs at the time, and it was just a perplexing thing that they did not add to these machines. So I actually have a DVD drive, or I had a DVD drive, because I've already done all the work to this machine. I'm not gonna make you guys suffer through hours of me struggling with this machine, but I had a DVD drive actually meant for these machines that somebody actually grafted onto a Pismo drive module, and I still had that, and I decided to pull that thing off the drive module and put it into here, and it works perfectly fine. Now, thankfully, that drive is a super drive, so this thing is set for life at this point, unless that drive decides it wants to go bad, which it could humor me and decide to do that, maybe even live on this video, but hopefully it'll be good for a good long while. The hard drive also was needing replacement in this machine, which is why it was handed to me, as I may have just said before, and I don't remember because, woo, my short-term memory sucks. Anyway, that was the main reason I was in here, and I decided I wanted to just do this thing once and never again. So I went on eBay and got a 128 gig SSD for this thing and put that thing in there. And arguably, given the stock hard drive size, which I believe is like 20 gigabytes, I can't remember, you could get away with a 64 gigabyte drive. I didn't want to do that because I never want to get into this thing ever again while it's in my possession. And I hope this machine outlives me at this point, because if I never have to open this machine again, it will be too soon. That's how annoying these machines are to work on. They are not fun at all. Just take it from me. So let's give it the tour now that I've concluded my complaining. We have Kensington lock, we have modem, we have Ethernet. I do not believe this is gigabit, which is kind of weird, but you do you, Apple, because Apple was very much an early proponent of gigabit Ethernet, but they may have only did that for the professional models. I don't know. We have FireWire 400, which is a very nice thing to have on older Macs. We have two USB 2.0 ports, which is good to have on a vintage Mac as well, because that means I can move files over USB drive between my modern machines and this machine without having to worry about slow data speeds. I believe this is mini VGA. I could be wrong. Someone will correct me in the comments. I know I do not remember these mini connectors. And we have a standard audio out jack. These in older iBooks were actually composite outs as well. I do not think we can do that with this machine though. We also have a vent for the hard drive, which is kind of unnecessary these days because we have an SSD in here, and those tend to run a lot cooler for the most part. We have the battery, which I really hate that these batteries are part of the bottom pan because they don't line up ever, and they just look bad. I'm kind of glad Apple moved away from this for a little bit before just putting the batteries in the machine entirely. But yeah, we have the hood release, or the lash release, thinking in car terms here. We have the optical drive, which again has been replaced, and the power input, which is on the opposite side of where it is on the PowerBook. Why? I don't know. And on the back, we have the hinge, and on the bottom pan, we are missing all the feet, as is usual for these machines. But notably, we are not having any cracking on these screw holes, which is very normal for these if they've been treated a bit rough over the years, which this one looks like it has been. The white does hide the scratches very, very well. And looking at it from the angle that I'm actually looking at it, because I'm like way back here looking at it from afar, I can see they're in the reflections all the scratches, but you guys can't. It looks very nice for you guys. I wish I had your guys' vision right now. But anyway, let's go ahead and fire this thing on. Now, you may be thinking, Exodium, what are you doing? Where's the power adapter? Well, where we're going, we don't need no power adapter. So let me get this facing up to you guys, and we'll be right back. Here we are with the machine open, and it's kind of laying on its back, facing upward into the camera, because I'm not going to be doing too much. I have not done much with this machine just yet. I really do need to. I mean, I have a couple games installed, and I'm not going to really play them just yet. But let's get into the meat and potatoes of this machine and turn it on. Now, it's going to look a little yellowed here, but that's also because I have a warm light kind of behind my desk. This actually is perfectly fine. It isn't yellowed in any way, so don't worry about it. But we do have the bezel, which is a little bit broken up here, but I mean, it's whatever. As I attested to earlier, the parts well has kind of dried up for these machines. So short of getting like one of these machines that's completely knackered with good chassis components, I'm not going to be able to really do much with this machine from an appearance standpoint. But I don't care. It works, and that's all I really care about. So let's go ahead and start it up. Keeping in mind, again, we are running off an SSD. And I'm actually using an mSATA SSD that's using a little bridge board to connect to the IDE bus, because that's really the best way to go about it these days. IDE SSDs do exist, but they are fairly pricey, and I believe the King spec ones are basically just an mSATA SSD on a bridge board sold as a like package solution with a bit of a markup applied to it. So really, that's what you want to do. So we are at the desktop, booting, well, kind of booting into the desktop here. And let's go look at the specs, because, you know, that's what matters, right? So we're looking at 10.3.9 here, which I wanted to run Panther on this machine, because I already have enough Tiger machines as it stands. Like my MDD is running Tiger. I believe my G4 PowerBook is running Tiger. So I wanted just a machine that is running Panther, because I don't have a Panther machine really handy at the moment. Oh yeah, and I have a Mac Mini that's running Tiger as well. So yeah, again, I want a Panther machine. I really want one machine, ideally for every era. That's kind of how I collect things, with some exceptions here and there. This is the Panther machine. We have a 1.07 gigahertz PowerPC G4. So that is actually a little bit better than the machine I originally had, which was, I believe, either an 867 or a 933. I can't remember. My brain doesn't go back that far at the moment as far as like remembering little details like that. And we have 1.25 gigabytes of DDR SD RAM. Now, that was kind of a fun thing to find, because DDR, surprisingly, is not all that easy to find locally. So I actually had to buy a stick of 1 gigabyte DDR from China, believe it or not. And it took a couple weeks to get here, and it thankfully did get here, and it worked perfectly fine. And I'm very happy that it did, because I would have been very sad if it didn't. But DDR, surprisingly, is not easy to find, not as easy to find as I thought it would be. I'm sure at like 10 minutes after this video goes up, there's going to be a bunch of DDR on eBay, and people are like, "You're wrong. What's wrong with you?" But when I was actually looking for this machine, there wasn't any on eBay that wasn't in China. So yeah, I'm glad it works, and I'm glad this machine is now maxed out, because you have one RAM slot for this machine, and that's your lot. So we go to more info. We can see all the wonderful little specs here, like the L2 cache, the memory, the bus speed, the ROM version, the serial number. See, we look at memory, and we have a built-in slot, which is not a slot at all. It's soldered to the board. So even if you do not have a RAM stick installed in this machine, it will still boot and still work. As for PCI AGP, let's see what card we have for video. We have a ATI Rage, or an ATI something of something. Not sure which one we have in here. Not really being forthcoming with us, unfortunately, but I'll maybe edit in what this card is supposed to be. But we have 32 megabytes of VRAM. Not bad, not bad. Coming over to ATA, we can see the meat and potatoes of the upgrades that we did on this thing. We have a DVD-R, which is weird that it's calling it a DVD-R, because it actually is a super drive. It's Apple supported and shipped, so this is an official first-party drive from Apple, and it does burn both DVDs and CDs. And the problem with this machine, as I was saying earlier, or one of the problems, was that it wouldn't read DVDs, because the original optical drive wasn't a DVD reader. It was just CDs only. And as we can see here, I've got, with my horrible handwriting, a DVD for Tiger. I'm going to go ahead and put that in, and we can see that it will read it perfectly fine. While that reads, we can also see here the SSD that I put into it, which is a Dogfish SSD, which might be a no-name SSD company, but they do make the SSDs that work in these machines, because I believe they have to be backwards compatible with SATA 1. I could be wrong about that, but I've seen other YouTubers use them to great effect on these older machines, and they work. So that's why I bought from that brand, even though, you know, you could buy like a Samsung or something. These SSDs just work. I actually do have a 256 gigabyte Samsung SSD that I could have used in this machine. Well, it would have fit the mSATA slot, but unfortunately, it doesn't actually work. The machine will not recognize it. So yeah, I guess Dogfish for the win on this one. But as we can hear, it is actually reading the disc, and there's our install DVD right there. Let's go ahead and eject that, because we don't want to install Tiger on this machine, at least not right now. And there's our DVD back. Sweet. So we go to USB over here. You can see we have high-speed USB bus. These ones are arguably for the trackpad and the keyboard. But yep, USB 2.0 as we can see there. Firewire 400 is here. We do have AirPort. Unfortunately, the AirPort hardware is so old in here that it's not going to work on any modern network. So if I really want to connect this thing up to my network, I either have to get a legacy router or I have to just string an Ethernet cable over here, and I usually opt to just string the Ethernet cable over here because that's usually faster than the wireless hardware in these machines anyway. So that's fine, and plus I have a Ethernet switch relatively convenient to my desk, so getting an Ethernet cable over here is really not a hard thing to do. And then we have the modem, which, I mean, arguably in this day and age isn't really useful for much of anything, but hey, it's there if you want it. Some other odds and ends, I guess, before we close out this video, because there's really not much else to talk about. If we go over here, we do have Mac OS 9 installed. On this machine, you cannot install it natively, so you have to run it in Classic. And I can go ahead and start it, and we should get the wonderful little startup window here, and it should start relatively fast, because again, we're on an SSD, and it's running a reduced set of things because of Classic environment. But then it'll start, and hey, we have Classic now running in the background. I'm going to stop that because we don't actually need it at the moment. Then if we go over here, we have the iBook's SSD, which we have 111 gigabytes available, so we're hardly using any of this. I need to put more stuff on this at some point, but again, I've been kind of burned out as of late, so I've really not been doing too much retro things. I really need to get back on the bandwagon. So eventually, I will be putting more stuff on this machine and having a little more fun with it. I do know eventually I want to put some Unreal Tournament on this thing and use it to test out my Unreal Tournament server, but that'll be something I do later, maybe. I've got a lot of things on the plate right now. But yeah, I think this will be a good time to close out the video because there's really not much to say about this machine other than it's pretty cool, and I thank Nick for handing it off to me because I really do enjoy this little machine, and I enjoy the fact that it's got a working battery even. Like, man, that's a miracle in and of itself. Like, somebody, either this is a new old stock battery, or someone rebuilt it, or someone took advantage of that battery recall very late in its life, and they took immaculate care of the battery for all these years. Either way, it's a miracle that this thing works as well as it does. And I would have showed you the cycles and such, but Apple System Profiler actually doesn't have that info on Panther. I believe that was added with Tiger, so I'm curious as to how many cycles this battery has. I may have to put Tiger on it to find out. But yeah, really nice machine. I'm really happy with it. I need to do a little bit of cosmetic work on it, like I've actually done on the top here, because it had some really nasty gashes in it and such. But it's a really awesome machine, and I'm really thankful to Nick for passing it off to me. And yeah, that's the end of the video. Not much else to say. Hopefully you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.